when you're getting in trouble for this, you're not actually getting in trouble from the state. You're usually getting sued from someone that you paid as a contractor that comes back and says you should have been paying me as an employee. So you have to be really careful because people, they want their money and sometimes they get desperate and they'll come after you for that.
All right. So this week, we're going to talk about whether or not you should hire someone as a contractor or an employee and all the things you really need to know about this. And Andrea is such a good person to speak on this because she's out of California, and California be crazy. I'll just say it's a little bit crazy when it comes to regulations of how to run your business. I think if you've been in the business world long enough, you know there's a lot of people who choose to not work with people in California and choose to not be in California or hire in California because they do have a lot of requirements. And so this is why Andrea is like the perfect person to talk on this because she has done taxes in California for her whole career.
Yes, I'm a California tax expert. I know how messy it can be. I know how strict they are. And one of the most important things is to make sure you know which state you're in and which, if you're hiring someone as an employee and a contractor, and how your state treats that, because they're very different in every state, and you can get in a lot of trouble if you're paying someone as a contractor and they're supposed to be an employee.
Yes, 100%. So let's start off with like some basics of like, what's the difference between an employee and a contractor? And an employee receives W-2 wages from you and likely benefits. Right? And contractors, you tend to pay less in the sense that you're not paying benefits for them, you're not prepaying their taxes for them, but they have more independence and more responsibility to do the thing you've hired them to do.
Right.
What does that actually look like when we're having a conversation as to whether or not you have a contractor or you have an employee? Well, let's start with how you pay them. Why don't you share the difference in like the uniqueness of what an employee pay looks like versus a contractor pay?
So for an employee, you're putting them on payroll and you're paying payroll taxes every time that you pay them. You have to pay Medicare and Social Security. You're also, in some states, required to have a retirement plan for them. Like in California, if they're going to be hired as an employee, they need to have a 401k and also health insurance. So as a business owner, it's really enticing to only hire contractors because you're not paying Medicare, Social Security in. You don't have to give them a retirement plan. You don't have to pay for health insurance for them. But this can get you in a lot of trouble if they're working for you full time. If you're paying a contractor, you're just sending them cash. You're sending them Zelle, whatever it is. You're transferring money from your business account to their account for the hours that they worked for you.
That giggle was my face when she said she was sending people money via Zelle. Y'all.
That's how people pay contractors.
Sometimes, not my favorite way for you to pay contractors.
But that's what we see when we open people's books.
It's true.
We see Venmo, Zelle, PayPal. They're just transferring cash to these contractors. And when you pay a contractor, one more thing, you collect a W-9 from them, and then you issue them a 1099 at the end of the year. That contractor then has to report that income on their tax return, and they pay self-employment tax on that income, which is the Medicare and Social Security.
And that's where it's enticing, right? Is it actually is less cost to the employer to pay people via 1099 payments because you don't have to pay the taxes for them. However, there are stipulations based on each state that are very relevant as to how you should be paying them based on who and how they show up in your business, right?
Right. And I will say I've seen this a few times, and when you're getting in trouble for this, you're not actually getting in trouble from the state. You're usually getting sued from someone that you paid as a contractor that comes back and says you should have been paying me as an employee. So you have to be really careful because people, they want their money, and sometimes they get desperate and they'll come after you for that.
Yes. And I think we always are of this notion that that won't happen to us. But just like insurance, we prepare just in case somebody does get, the wild hair and come after us. So what is the ABC test? I think people talk about the ABC test, and I even am not as familiar. I always look it up and do all of that. So you want to tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so the ABC test is the test to see if someone should be paid as an employee or if they should be paid as a contractor. So if they pass this ABC test, then you're able to pay the person as a contractor instead of putting them on payroll, giving them all the benefits. So the first one is the worker free from the company's control? So when you hire someone, are they able to set their hours? Are they able to do the work whenever they want to do the work? Or do you have a strict schedule for them, telling them they need to clock in at 9 o'clock and clock out at 5? If you're doing that, then they're an employee. They're not a contractor.
Yeah. The reason it's important to know these nuances between these questions is how you conduct yourself within the business. So sometimes we want to have control over people's schedules and all of that. So I'm thinking of a particular instance where it was less about saying they had to work certain hours, but them committing to what hours they work. So like even those nuanced things, be sure to keep that in mind when you are setting rules and expectations within the business, because for people to be the contractor, they have to be free to make their schedule. And however, you can also ask them what their schedule is, right? So there's a piece of that too.
I think to add into that too, it's great to set all of these rules and tell the contractor what they are. Make sure you have them in writing and they're in that contractor agreement, so that if anyone ever comes back and says, hey, no, you should have been paying me as an employee, you can say, no, look, it's in the contract here. You can set your own hours. It's written and we signed it. Yeah. So it's good to have an agreement, at least draft it, run it through AI, have a lawyer double check it for you. But that's really going to cover you in case of a lawsuit.
Yeah, it's definitely something worth investing in to make sure you're doing it the right way. So what is B?
B is, does the work fall outside the company's usual business? Yeah. So if, we're accountants, if we hire someone to build our website, that's outside of our usual course of business. We can pay them as a contractor to do that. We also have an IT guy that we pay as a contractor. He comes in and helps us when we're hiring someone. We need to set up their computer or we're having computer issues. He doesn't work for us full time, but he's outside of our usual course of business. He doesn't prepare tax returns, so we don't have to put him on payroll.
And I think that is the same too from even workflow standpoint, like creating systems with inside the business, like that could be a contractor position, because we're not doing that for people. And that person would not be working for us doing that for somebody else. Like they're working within our business too. So I do think it's so important to know the nuances, right? Because if not, you can find yourself in a sticky position. And sometimes it's worth hiring the expert to be like, yes, this works. No, this doesn't, unfortunately.
Right. It's also, this is like one of those things too, why hiring like a fractional CFO is great instead of hiring a full-time CFO for your business, because you can pay them as a contractor.
Such
And
a
then
good point.
you don't have to pay in that Medicare and Social Security. You don't have to give them health insurance, et cetera. They can help you out every month. They can work with you consistently, but they're not internal, like part of your payroll 401k. It'll really help save on costs.
And it is really hard to be in a position to pay a fractional or a CFO what a CFO needs to be paid, because fractional CFO is way more affordable, but it also gives you exactly what you need to be able to strategically work within your numbers and within your business too. That's such a good point. I think the more fractional you can go with your C-suite, the better, especially as you start. I think a lot of times we disqualify ourselves to be able to have that C-suite executive team. But like you can do that at a fractional way, and it's going to save you a ton of resources and really not hinder your cash flow.
Yeah, I think when you're starting and growing, it's great to do as many fractional things as you can, and to get it off of your own plate so that you can focus on what you do best.
For sure. What about C?
Does the worker operate an independent business doing that type of work? So going back to the example of our IT person, he owns an IT company. He helps other people with their IT. So he operates an independent business doing that type of work. So if you have a situation where you're like, should this be a contractor or an employee? I'm super confused. One of the best questions to ask yourself is, do they have other clients?
Right.
Do they have a small business where they're doing this same work for me? They're doing it for other people too.
100%. And I think that is huge, because I think sometimes brick and mortar businesses are used to wanting to just hire employees, when sometimes it's better to have people on your staff that are not there every day, that don't cost you something every single day
to twiddle their thumbs.
Yeah, like to not get things done. And I think I have seen it both ways, right? Like we are in the online space, so we're very familiar with talking to people in this fractional role. They get it, they understand it. But when I have worked with brick and mortar old school businesses, sometimes I can see this tendency to want to hire everyone. And I'm like, that is not actually going to grow your business. And I think that's also where this ABC test kind of comes into play, where it's like you having more people on staff doesn't actually give you more manpower. And you kind of have to assess in that way too. So it kind of is that test on either side of whether or not you're, W-2 happy or contractor happy,
Yeah, definitely.
So I think the moral of the story is like, it's not as simple as just like what you want to do. There are practical questions you need to ask yourself and opportunities where you can look beyond the numbers to make sure you're not in a situation later, because it's going to cost you a lot more if you get this wrong than to do it right in the first place. That's just my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, I agree. You need to look at everything. You need to look at how much it's going to cost you if you're hiring an employee. Add in their benefits, add in 401k, health insurance, workers' comp. But you also need to make sure you're doing legally the right thing based off of the state that you live in.
Yeah. And I think this is like what we're trying to do here, is to have conversations about these things that we know business owners have these questions, but they don't necessarily always have someone to ask them to. And so I hope this was helpful for you, and come back next week and we'll be talking about something else that is helpful when it comes to your cash flow and paying your taxes.